start with the good stuff. Let's talk about what happened this past school year in your district that you want to brag about.
Well, we actually went through the entire school year with our construction projects. We have $132 million construction project building fund going on, and that was funded by a $109 million bond referendum that our voters passed overwhelmingly, and that has gone exceedingly well. We have just about completed the first phase of the new Wren Elementary, of the new Palmetto Middle School, Wren Middle School and Palmetto Middle School. And those first phases are just about done. We'll be ready to welcome students into those new buildings when they come back in August. We also have additions that have been added to Powdersville Middle School, to Powdersville Elementary School, to Spearman Elementary School. And we have started and should be finished by mid-year, by December, on Powdersville High School. Cedar Grove should begin in the next month or two with an 8-room addition there. And so we're really excited about the building program and being able to fix some of our roofs, some of our safety and security issues we've been able to shore up. So I feel really good about that.
And now, how fast is your district growing?
Well, we're growing pretty fast. We have anywhere from 2% to 5% growth in any particular school, depending on the year that it happens to be in. So particularly in the northern end of the district, we're growing fairly rapidly, and it's a challenge to keep up with that growth as far as having enough classroom space for students.
The school projects you just mentioned should take care of that for a little while.
It should. Our hope is that they were 10-year projects, so our hope is that they'll take us 10 years down the road. We'll cross our fingers and hope that happens.
Well, now let's move into what's got everybody concerned, starting a new school year with COVID-19 in place. Tell me what y'all have been doing here.
Sure. Well, it seems like that's all we've been doing, is really talking about how we return to school as safely as possible. We knew that we had to give our parents a choice. So our parents got to choose about mid-July. They got to choose whether they wanted their student to either go face-to-face or full virtual. So we created the Anderson One Virtual Learning Academy for those parents who the students were either high-risk students, or potentially there may have been somebody high-risk at home that it just wasn't a good idea for those students to return to face-to-face instruction. So those students have what we feel like is a really good option with the Virtual Learning Academy. The rest of the students will be coming back in some form or fashion in a face-to-face manner, creating all of the things that all of the districts around us have done with students and staff wearing masks when they enter and exit the building anytime they're in transition, making sure that our cleaning and disinfectant has really been really send that into overdrive to make sure that spaces are clean, trying to cohort our students so that students are really only exposed to smaller groups of students rather than larger groups. Our students all will have desk shields that they'll put on their desk in order to hopefully provide one more layer of protection between students and between the students and the teacher. It's been an enormous task over the summer to work through that process as to how we open schools. We sent a survey out to our parents, and the vast majority of our parents, as we expected, would like their students to return to face-to-face instruction if at all possible. And so we've really tried to develop our plans to try to get all of our students back 5 days a week if we possibly can. We do have a hybrid model that has in the middle and the high schools has only half of the students come in. It's essentially 2 days on and 2 days off, and obviously during the days off, those students would be virtually learning with their same teacher. And then there's a possibility that we may see a real rise in the number of cases in Anderson 1, and that may necessitate a particular school or maybe even the entire district going virtual for a period of time. We would certainly like to avoid that if we could, but we're not really in control of that right now.
Now, how many students' parents chose to go virtual at this point?
We've got about 15% of our parents, which is where we are. It's about 1,500 parents. We have about 1,500 students. We have a little over 10,000 students, and about 1,500 have chosen the virtual option.
And for the ones coming back, what will they notice different? You mentioned the desk shields. What else will they notice is different coming to school?
Yeah, I think the mask. They'll the temperature checks when they walk in the school building. The school buses will be only at 50% capacity.
How does that work?
Well, but basically what we'll have to do is we'll have to run double routes in the elementary school. And what that means is there'll be a group of buses that'll go out and they'll pick up 50% of the kids, drop them off at school, and then they'll go back out and pick up the rest of the 50% that ride the bus. That certainly creates some real challenges for us. We've had to change our start and end times for our schools in order to accommodate for that. Really had to spread out the amount of time between elementary starting and middle and high school starting. And obviously that creates some conflicts for parents in the afternoons, because there's a good bit of time between when elementary school lets out and when the middle and the high school gets out. We know there's some real inconveniences that the school district, the teachers, the students, and certainly our parents are going to really have to kind of bear with us this year as we work through this process.
So we got temperature checks, we got the shields. What else I'll cut you off there.
Well, that's okay. We've got masks. Everybody will be wearing masks unless they're greater than 6 feet apart or unless they're behind their desk shields. They'll see their classrooms will be spread out as much as they possibly can. They won't be in those tightly packed rows that they have been. They'll spread out as much as they possibly can in the classroom. The cohorting we talked about, being able to, particularly in the elementary school, that's a little bit easier, is to make sure that those 25 students stay with those 25 students as much as we possibly can. We can do that to some extent at the elementary. It's pretty difficult to do that at the high school level, and then of course we're going to have to be very methodical when a student or a staff member gets sick or a student and staff member tests positive for COVID. We've got those exclusion principles. The interim guidance is out from DHEC, and we expect to have the full guidance in the next couple of weeks that will tell us exactly how those exclusion principles and who will have to quarantine, who will have to isolate, and we'll provide those to our communities as soon as DHEC gives it to us.
About food services, I know they've been running full tilt since March, I guess. People forget that when things shut down, schools didn't shut down. They just didn't meet in the classroom. Right. So tell me about the food services and what they've been doing all summer and what they got planned for the fall.
Sure. We're really appreciative of our student nutrition service staff. We have got a great staff that work to serve an enormous amount of meals since March, and even through the summer they've been serving meals. And some of the things will look different in the cafeteria. Obviously, there'll be fewer students in the cafeteria. They'll take their desk shields to the cafeteria to help provide a little bit more protection. Students will be spread out for schools where the cafeteria is not quite large enough to house the number of students that they have. Some students will actually be eating lunch in their classrooms. There'll be a little bit less variety for the students. We kind of pride ourselves, our Student Nutrition Service Department does, on providing a lot of variety to students, and that's just not practical when we actually have to prepackage the meal prior to the students getting there. But we're still going to provide every student with a nutritious meal. Even those students who are participating in the Virtual Learning Academy will have meals available for those students to pick up as well. The full pay students will pay the regular price, and the free and reduced lunch students would pay the corresponding price that they would typically pay in school.
What about extracurricular activities? I know you've always talked about that, and one of the really important things for student development is extracurricular activities. How is that going to be impacted, and what's going to survive and what's not?
Sure, that's a great question. Sports is certainly one of the things that people talk about. High school sports, middle school sports are governed by the South Carolina High School League. We are at model or version 1.5 right now. We've been doing that for a number of weeks now. Our athletes, student athletes, have been going out and conditioning, and quite frankly, that's going really, really well. The protocols are very strict on the number of people that can be together. They have temperature checks, they have wellness checks every day. They wear masks the entire time, except for when they're actually participating in a drill or activity. And at this point, there's no shared equipment that they have without it being cleaned prior to the next student using it. That has worked very, very well so far. We really look to the high school league for the guidance for the next step. Hopefully that 2.0 will come down the road. I wish I could tell you what's going to happen with fall sports.
So we don't know about how many people can come see games or how that's going to work or any of that yet.
At this point, we do not know what that's going to look like. To be quite honest, we're spending the vast majority of our time on how do we open school as safely as we possibly can with kids face to face. And we'll work with the high school league and with their recommendations, once those come out, and how those fit Anderson 1 and our philosophies. So we'll see what that looks like. Clubs, things like band, we'll continue to have band and strings and those activities. Some of our school-based clubs, we're going to kind of not start immediately. We want to get back into the school year before we start having a bunch of after-school clubs and activities. We want to make sure we've got the process down before we implement those other extracurricular activities.
Did the sudden shutdown of last school year help teachers prepare for this to teach remotely, or did that?
I'm not sure the sudden shutdown helped them. I think the struggles that our staff went through in order to try to educate kids with, quite frankly, virtually no time to prepare. I think what it helped them see was there were a lot of things we had to work out. And while we are an e-learning district and had actually implemented an e-learning day prior to the shutdown in March. It's completely different shutting down for a day or 2 days or 3 days as opposed to shutting down for weeks or months as it turned out.
E-learning was never intended to be that kind of...
Certainly our e-learning was never intended. Now, we had some teachers who went above and beyond. They did some extraordinary things with students over the break. But it was because of their individual efforts that they were able to do that. We learned an awful lot, and of course a lot of that will be placed in to the Virtual Learning Academy so that we don't make those same mistakes twice.
Now, with the teachers teaching in the Virtual Academy, will they be doing it on site here or from home, or how will that work?
Well, right now, our plan is that if you are an elementary teacher in the Virtual Learning Academy, you could do that from home, or you could come to your classroom and do that. So right now, those teachers have the option to do that. Our middle and high school Virtual Learning Academy is actually very synchronous instruction. And so if you're assigned to Miss Smith's math class first period in the middle and the high school, whether you are face-to-face in that class or whether you're virtual in that class, you'll tune in to Miss Smith's class at 8 o'clock on that day. And we feel good about that. We feel like that provides those virtual learning students virtually the exact same instructional experience that the student at school is, with the exception of they're actually not at school. That there's some technology things that we're working through to make sure that process is as smooth as it possibly can. But that's what the Virtual Learning Academy will look like in the middle and the high schools. The elementary, that's just not practical to do it that way. If you've got 24 kindergarten students, it's not practical to have 3 more at home that are virtually learning. But you could do that in the middle of the high school and be reasonably successful.
What special challenges does this present for the Career Center? Because that's such a hands-on, it's almost like you couldn't do welding.
Right.
You couldn't have a welding class online, really.
It is. The Career Center certainly creates its own unique challenges because of the nature of the course itself. We've worked very closely with the Career Center as well as Anderson School District 2, who shares the Anderson 1 and 2 Career Center with us. And we feel like we have a good plan in place. The good thing about the Career Center is that those classrooms and their space is large enough that they could actually have a full class and actually spread those students out for the 6 feet of spacing that they need in order for the social distancing. And so students who are face-to-face obviously would go to class just like they've always. They would go to the Career Center and take the classes just as always. The students who are virtual actually have an option. They could take the class virtually, and our Career Center teachers are working very hard to make sure that those students get a really good education, even though they may miss out on some of the hands-on things that maybe some of the face-to-face students are doing. But those students also have the option to actually attend the Career Center if it was safe to do so. Obviously, those students that are high risk probably would not attend the Career Center regardless. But that is an option that could help some of those students who maybe feel like it might be okay to attend that one class, but maybe not the rest of their classes.
You and I briefly talked about this before we started, but explain how, if some student is saying doing virtual or coming in and decided they want to switch, how could they switch and when could they switch and all that kind of thing? Sure.
Like we talked about earlier, our parents have already made that decision about whether to go 100% virtual or whether to go face-to-face. We certainly know that sometimes parents change their mind. The district certainly has changed our mind an awful lot over the summer as new data presents itself, as we get new recommendations from either DHEC or CDC or maybe from the State Department of Education. And so we are trying our best to work with those parents who want to make the change now. It is an enormous amount of work for the district to create those virtual learning environments. And if we don't know how many teachers we need, it's virtually impossible to do it. And that's why it's so important that we wanted parents to make that choice as best decision they could possibly make for their student. Once school starts, and we know this is going to happen, a student virtually will say, this is just not for me. I thought this was going to work out, but it's just not going to work out. And also a student at that may be face-to-face, something may happen that potentially that student may have to go virtual for an extended period of time. And so right now the process is that parents can choose to do that at the end of the 9 weeks. They can, and assuming we have room in the virtual environment or assuming we have room in the face-to-face environment, we would allow that switch at that time. And obviously the district and individual schools are always looking at students' individual situations and trying to make the best possible decisions that we can make based on that particular student and their circumstances.
What have you learned from this that if and when we get the vaccine and things get back to some sort of relative normal that will help what you've done in the past be better because of what's happened here?
And I sure hope that vaccine comes quick. I sure do. I think one of the things that we've learned an awful lot about is virtual learning. And I think if we become proficient in not only instructing students in our classroom, but at the same time instructing students at home, that really opens up some real good possibility to students. We have students that are on home-based or homebound assignments, and sometimes it may be that, say they fractured their leg really badly and they just can't attend school for 4 weeks. Well, that's a student who could definitely do their math and do their science. They could actually participate in their reading instruction, but we don't have the mechanism for doing that prior to this year. Well, now not only will we have the mechanism, but we'll have an awful lot of experience to go, well, how do we make that work? And what are the pitfalls and what are the issues? Because, we've got 30, 50 years worth of how do you instruct a student standing or sitting in your classroom face to face. And we've got very little experience as a district. Well, what do we do with that student who has to go out for 4 weeks? And I think this really opens up some opportunities for us to really look at some of that down the road.
When are your schools open?
The 25th August 25th is the first day for students.
I know this is a unique opening, and I know that today you just got through talking to DHEC before we talked. Things are changing every day, every hour sometimes. What's the best place, and how are y'all communicating with parents and students, and what's the best place for them to keep up with the latest?
Well, our website is really the best place to do that. All of our current information is loaded under our COVID portion of our website. We send out a weekly update to parents, and anything that changes or any new information that we have that week, we send out to parents in that weekly email. It is. I feel like it's been a good way for parents to expect that update. It is frustrating sometimes for us because we make a decision, we feel good about a decision, and then guidance changes, or recommendations may change in a particular area, or the virus itself increases in an area or decreases in an area. And we know that this is frustrating for parents, and believe me, it is frustrating for us too, not to have the answer right now today for what's going to happen, 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks or even sometimes next week, what's going to happen. We know that parents need information, and we know that that's critical for them in order to be able to make really good decisions for their families. And we have tried our best to provide that information on a timely basis as quickly as we possibly can.
And if they get confused, they can just call here?
Absolutely. We have had a number of parents who have called individual schools as well as just call the district office. We are more than happy to answer parents' questions. And sometimes they just want to make sure that they understand something. They read it, but they said, okay, I just want to make sure. And sometimes they want advice on, well, this is my particular student's situation. Can you give me some advice on, how do you think we should move forward? And we welcome any opportunity to communicate with our parents in that way.